Okay, so we're kind of here. Welcome everybody. Here comes somebody else for. Let me give it. Wait a minute, and I'll say it once. Hey Joyce, are you here? Okay, so welcome everybody. We're here just going through the final lecture on the series on images, 41 of the Pathwork Guide lectures, and it's called Images, the Damage They Do. Is that right? I'm getting confused at which lectures we're on. It is only 41, right? That's what everybody read. I think this is the last lecture on images. I don't have that up, so that's what I'm confusing myself about. Somehow I thought it had a different title. So if anybody wants to check for me and just look and see if this is the final.
Well, I don't know if it's the final one, but that's the correct lecture.
Is there any other lecture on images after that? What's 42? What's that one? Okay, well, I guess I'm not sure. We may have done this one the last time, so I'm confused because I thought that the image lectures there was 4 in the series, and the last one, maybe this is the correct title. I'm sorry.
Sorry for 42 is called Christmas Blessings.
Okay, so this is
and subjectivity.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So excuse my confusion. This is the final lecture on images, and I read it a little while ago, so that's why I'm confused. So let's go through and see if I found, in general, these lectures on images, like images are such a profound and important piece. And I don't find the guide very clear, sort of in the way that he outlines or speaks to them in any of these lectures exactly. So this one felt a little better. And maybe from what you were saying, people got this and liked it. So, open for discussion and comment as we go. And so, greetings in the name of the Lord, my dear friends. I bring you blessings as usual. Blessed is this hour. There is so much fear, shame, and separateness in the human heart. We recognize it again and again. The fear and shame are often hidden away so that the personality is not even aware of them anymore and just suffers vaguely in a continuous gnawing pain. How sad it is to observe this, particularly because it is unnecessary. It is but a phantom, my friends. The fear and shame you are so busily hiding have no reality, and yet spoil the life you could enjoy and could use for the building up of your spiritual strength. So does this resonate? Anybody have a comment to this? For me, it kind of does feel like, that it really sort of names that sort of most of our fear and shame has no basis, sort of, it's based on some kind of unconscious, piece here. And so we do build our whole defense system, around all of this. And basically, if we can hold and face the fear and shame, which is difficult, right? Because it seems so real. And when we were little, like we owned it, we identified it, but if this is part of the journey, is, like identifying and seeing, when we encounter, difficult issues, oftentimes we're into an image. I was actually just today walked into one of my own. I went to the dentist's office, and it had been a while since I'd been, and I was, needing some serious work. And I don't know, I thought I was asking a reasonable question, but it seemed to, like affect the hygienist in a way that, you know, she refused to treat me after that. And I didn't even realize that that was what was happening. So it was like, you know, and I could see, you know, like how it was an old dynamic that was playing out there too. And, you know, so I was, you know, caught in it to some degree, but also more in observance of it. So that was useful, but, you know, could feel the whole drama, trauma story, you know, alive in me, you know, like feeling, you know, like and falsely accused or victimized, or, you know, like, I don't know, you know, it was kind of one of those things of, well, I don't even know what I did, you know. So an old, you know, childhood place, right? So we're all kind of, you know, going through and you know, repeating these old dynamics within us, and they often seem transferred to the, you know, moment and real adult issues, or, you know, things in this life, but you know, current in this life. But most of the time, you know, it's really from this past. And so
Darlene,
uh-huh
could you close out that right part of the screen that says share? Maybe we could get a bigger screen here.
It doesn't, you know, if I make it bigger, I mean, I can make it bigger, but then I can't see it because your picture is
No, that I don't know. It just seems you were cutting off some of the edge, but maybe not. No, yeah, we're not. Well,
yeah, I think it's maybe just like
there's better.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Yeah. So, you know, again, he's saying there's so much shame, fear, separateness in the human heart. We recognize it again and again. The fear and the shame are often hidden away so that the personality is not even aware of them and just suffers vaguely in a continuous gnawing pain. How sad it is to observe this, particularly when it is unnecessary. It is but a phantom, my friends. The fear and shame you are so busily hiding have no reality, and yet spoil the life you could enjoy and could use for the building up of your spiritual strength. So I'm continuing this series about the images in the human soul, for there is no person who does not have them. Such inner impressions are formed in young years, and from these impressions, wrong conclusions were drawn. And these very images are responsible for your suffering, for the phantoms you carry about decade after decade, and often incarnation after incarnation.
That's
Go ahead.
That's huge right there. I mean,
it is.
He's basically saying in the first paragraph, it's like you're killing your what is the term he calls for it all the time? Gosh, I just had it on the tip of my tongue. You know, your life force. You're clouding your life force with this image. You know, well, the image is the reason the life force is being clouded. It's creating so much distortion that it's clouding the life force. This is huge because, you know, if you're going to start somewhere on your spiritual journey, why not start right here?
Right.
It's like, what's my image and why am I carrying it? You know?
Right. And how is it unreal? You know, because there's a way in which our image seems to be sort of almost self-evident, or, you know, it's part of our history, right? And so it's easy to sort of be almost like spellbound by it, right? You know, or it's a kind of the guide often talks about spheres of consciousness, and talks about the image really forming a sphere of consciousness, right? And we actually, you know, can step out of that sphere, but when we're in that sphere, it is an actual, you know, kind of whole in and of itself, right? In a way of relating to the world, understanding the world. It has a certain feeling to it, a certain age even, you know, maybe that it connects to, or a certain state of suffering, usually because, if there's no image there, we don't suffer. The suffering comes with the image. And so, there's a way where we're struggling, where we're not, finding happiness. Often it's good to see, where an image is, active. And again, it's not all of us, right? But it's sort of part of our journey here is to bring them into the light of consciousness. And so it has to block us in a way, that's the way it gets our attention, and says, you have to work with me first, right? So where we're, going towards, our evolution and our manifestation of more higher self, where we get stuck is often where the images are. And then we have to work with those in order to continue in that evolutionary process.
Arlene?
Yeah.
Can I jump in for a second? This is really big for me right now because of, I just got a call about 2 hours ago that an old high school friend of mine in St. Louis just passed this past week, and from his wife, and it was a painful phone call. And I've seen him, I just saw him 2 weeks ago out here in Colorado. He was visiting in Boulder, and we had dinner together, the four of us. And and they're having a service in St. Louis this coming weekend, and I am just caught in images of, should I go, should I not go? And the fear and shame of not seeing people for 30 years, and what am I going to say? And I'm not good enough. And I mean, it's really in a process. I'm just watching the whole thing go through. It's really uncomfortable. Part of me wants to go because I want to honor him, and a large part of me doesn't want to go because I don't want to see some of these old people. I don't know. I'm very conflicted right now, and a lot of old memories are coming up that aren't particularly. Some are really good, and some are really bad. But the point is, it's all fear and shame based. Really, it's just amazing how it's swimming with it, and I just have to be with it because I can't get clear of where I'm going next. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Yeah, no, great. And this is the tricky thing about the fear and shame, it's like, it seems to be that, the only, real freedom from it is to go into, through, and out the other side of it, right? It's the exposure, it's the, and so, our tendency is definitely to go hide, or to, and sometimes, we can't force, so, but it might be some, interesting process to continue to, explore, all of this, because it does also seem like a kind of an opportunity, right? And, if you want to, I don't know if you have a helper or anything, but, if you want to talk to me later on or something, I'm happy to do that. And maybe some more clarity will come up as we work with the lecture too. So yeah, but that's a good example, right? It's a good example of how frozen we can get, and how, like uncomfortable these places are inside of us. And that's part of the relief that we get, as we walk through them to transform them. But in the process, it's pretty painful. It's like I can still feel the sting of the thing that happened this afternoon, right? So, and yet I know, like, okay, so there's something moving here, something trying to clarify and see more deeply and clearly, and heal more fully. So when the squeezes or the shame-based things happen or whatever, or we regress, which is kind of like, situation feels like a setup, and we just regress into it. I usually feel like, okay, the universe is asking me to, fall into this so I can see it more clearly, right? And there's really no need for shame. So the series about the images, and so we all have them, and you know, they're formed in young years, and then from those impressions, you know, we have these kind of generalizations that are extended so that we can, you know, protect ourselves, right? So it's a part of the defense system. And so we're, you know, trying to make the rules that say, okay, so that's safe and that's not safe, and this is okay and this is not okay. And you know, in some sense, these impressions are, you know, like over generalized to the point where they're really wrong conclusions, right? You know, and usually in the first place, you know, they may have been the best thing possible in the moment, you know, but you know, we give a story to it, and when we're little, we don't understand enough of what's going on, and we have this tendency where we want to make ourselves responsible for it, you know, because if it's our fault, then we can fix it, right? So there's an agency quest in this unconscious way that we take it on and make it our fault in a way, right? And if it's our fault, then we can fix it, and then we, you know, try to do it. Now, sometimes we get to the point where we think it's everybody else's fault, or we project it on everybody else, you know, and that can create another situation. But, you know, oftentimes the child, you know, is overly responsible for everything in their world, you know, because that gives them the illusion of some control where they have so little. And so, you know, then out of that ignorance, in a sense, our images are formed. And out of that need, you know, to be the cause of everything, you know, we often, you know, take on things that really are not for us. You know, it's a way of trying to, you know, change ourselves, let everybody else be, you know, loving us, accepting us. They got a phone going. You know who that is.
I'm sorry. Can you hear that?
Yeah, it was going. I could hear it, but now it stopped. Okay, so let's.
I'm not on mute. No wonder. Okay, sorry.
So yeah, that's okay. So, and I'm rambling a little bit too. So anyway, so here we are where, you know, he says, you all strive for the light of God, for liberation from your chains. But how many people seek this liberation by outer means, such as intellectual knowledge, or by outer events, whereby it cannot possibly be achieved? You know, we're always trying to manipulate the world to affect the improvement that we're seeking. The only way you can reach the freedom that you strive for is to delve into yourself. In that way, you will go through a tunnel of darkness and emerge on the other side to encounter the light of true independence. Only after you have recognized your own responsibility for the darkness while passing through the tunnel, which is not an easy experience, will you have truly gained real independence. So do not seek this liberation outwardly. It is of no avail. If you have not yet found and dissolved your images, you are ensnarled by them. You are constantly reenacting the drama of your own errors and wrong conclusions. You are caught in them unawares, and you repeat and repeat and repeat throughout your life. So does that, you know, like, to me, that's kind of like the sense and the key, you know, and I don't know whether that sounds judgmental or harsh. I mean, I think, you know, it's really a gift in a way, like, you know, it's the way that these things have to keep coming to us, you know, it's like their cry for help, and they're, you know, a way of saying, you know, like in a way, our higher self, you know, we took those on, you know, to transform and bring them into the light and into a better place. So where we're feeling our own, you know, shame, or our own, you know, pains or difficulties, you know, around images, then it really is part of our mission and task, right? To transform those, to heal those, to break through and free the soul substance that's trapped in them, right? You know, and in that way, set the energy also in the universe, you know, free. It's trapped in a way. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm rambling or not. I'm not following the lecture very much, right? So lots to say here, I guess, and so let me know if it's helpful. So he's talking about the self-search is the only thing in life that matters and will bring relief. And I would like to advise all those who have not yet had such an experience. So, he's saying, check it out, the Pathwork, do work, even therapy work, I think in some ways, all of it, just self-examination. And there are, lots of different systems now, right, for people to explore themselves. And so he says, you may be hesitant about starting because you do not know how to go about it. You may even lack the courage to ask for advice and help. Therefore, it's wise to start by discussing this. And so, there's a whole section here where he's just kind of encouraging people to do this work. So I'm going to skip that. And then he goes back in a little more to sharing with us, that if we search successfully, we can encounter ourselves and the trend inside of us of wanting to be more than we are. And that is why we feel insecure. So you might just tune in and, like, do you? And, why do you if you want to, or like, where is it that you resist just being, simple self, right? So just notice, drop that in. And also, see, why you doubt others. So he says, oftentimes the thought is like, since I'm not true to myself by wanting to appear better and greater, I'm not trustworthy. Others probably are the same. So, and when he says, one always judges others according to oneself, even if the self-knowledge is not conscious. So it's not enough to think that this is probably what is going on within yourself because it makes sense. It is absolutely necessary that we discover and experience, and there's this reasoning and variations of it, right? These inner thought forms and beliefs and different voices inside of us. And when we understand that we're kind of a many different voices and have different, aspects of our personality, and certain parts are activated in certain circumstances, then I think we can begin to start awakening, the observer self, right? And to me, this is a part of then how we can begin to, work in a healing way with whatever is coming up in consciousness. And that we can sort of become our ally and not just, sometimes we still will go unconscious, but even then we have more sense of what's happening, right? And can, not get completely lost in it. And believe me, every little time you fall down that rabbit hole and don't get completely lost in it, it's a win. It's a beautiful thing, right? It's all happening again in my understanding, and as part of that practice, that exercise, that, awakening awareness and to see what's inside of us, to not deny it, to, realize that it's something that we came here to serve in some way, to help heal. So when we've overcome the resistance of facing, what's in us, for the sake of truth, and in the spirit of the real truth seeker, we can ask, what is actually going on in me? And then you will feel the relief and the freedom that only facing one's truth can bring, no matter how unpleasant it may at first appear, no matter how unflattering in itself it is. The self-respect you must be lacking, as long as your self-contempt is hidden, will automatically vanish, at least to some degree, even before you've changed your inner attitude, by the mere fact that you have the courage to face the truth within yourself. So people felt that, experienced that in their own work, So there are many factors that are important to understand. And tonight, I want to discuss a few more concerning images and the search for them. Often you do not understand what made you retain an impression upon which you formed a wrong conclusion. Your mind has grown up and changed by what you have learned from your surroundings and from life. And yet, while your image is alive, you have not changed. It's like it embeds in us and we kind of grow up around it, right? You know, but in difficulties, we regress, right? That's just a natural thing. When we contract, we regress, right? And then until we've learned how to, you know, not contract, you know, then we're going to, you know, fall into these hidden pockets of images within us in various times, even after we've thought we've maybe outgrown them, you know, or transformed them completely. So they kind of, and we often have to just kind of drop into them and work them. And then, you know, we gain a little clarity and then later on we, you know, cycle back through a little bit. But we're going through this very frozen and, you know, rigid soul substance. And so it takes a while, and we can be, you know, compassionate, and, you know, we don't have to be judgmental about this whole process at all. And I think that's one of the things that, you know, it makes it more difficult. And there's a kind of shift when we can begin to identify with, you know, our higher self and less, you know, with this idealized self-image that, you know, struggles with these things. But, you know, when we can go in and just, you know, realize that in our childhood, we had these shocks, right? And maybe it was a sudden experience, but often, you know, it's like it's kind of a gradual thing, you know, like the guide says, there's a gradual discovery that things are contrary to one's dearest and most cherished expectations. And as children, we need to believe in Santa Claus, you know, we need to believe that and feel somewhat, you know, safety around us. And you know, sometimes, you know, those illusions have to be, you know, challenged, and we have to have a more mature understanding. But I think those discoveries, you know, when we're not ready for them, or there's a shock or something, you know, it's like it really does kind of freeze us in a certain level, and then, you know, we grow up around it. So I don't know, sometimes his examples work for me, sometimes they don't. He says, here's an example: a child lives with the idea that its parents are perfect and omnipotent. And when the realization dawns upon the child that this is not so, it comes as a shock. And although the realization may often come by a series of events until the new discovery makes its lasting impression, when a child finds out that what it used to believe about its parents or the world as such is not true, it loses its security. It is frightened. The child does not like what it finds, and therefore will push this unpleasant knowledge into the unconscious. And because it feels guilty, will also build defenses against what it considers a threat. So, you know, there's just information in some ways that especially if we don't have the right support around us as children, we can't integrate, we can't, you know, really take on. And in some ways, you know, that begins the quest that we're on in the spiritual journey, you know. So to me, that can be considered like the sacred wounding, you know. It's not something that shouldn't have happened. It's something that you know, necessarily happens to impel the journey in a way. And of course, it's very painful oftentimes, and you know, children, you know, get confused and lost and suffer in this world, you know. But this is part of where, if we can, you know, recognize our own inner children and, you know, awaken our own compassion for them, and, you know, re-guide them, right, you know, through what they've experienced and now, you know, into what they will be experiencing, right? We become our own sort of guide and, you know, inner parent. And then we also have the connection with the higher self, which sometimes we need because of, you know, we're here and we're more limited and human. And so we get lost in our own pain bodies as well. And then, you know, we can't help the inner child in us so much. We have to, you know, also seek the help from spirit. So he says, whether it happens suddenly or in a slow realization, this threat is like a shock, And you all know that shock causes numbness. And your body, as well as your nerves and your mind, become numb. And even to the extent that you lose consciousness temporarily or have other symptoms, right? So sometimes it's like really deep, and sometimes it's less, but to some degree, these shocks, and maybe they're repeated shocks, and so, we numb out, and then the child will experience a shock because the parents, the world, or life are not the way the child thought them to be. So although the impression that created the shock may or may not be objectively correct, still the deduction the child is capable of making is going to be, half truth. It's not going to be the full reality. And therefore, wrong, as the guide says, the deduction we're capable of is not the complete truth. And because children tend to generalize, they disregard, all other alternatives, and they project their own conclusions onto all other situations. A child's parents are its world, its universe. Therefore, what the child concludes after the shock must be applied to everyone else and to life in general. This is the wrong conclusion that creates the image. And this, we've talked a little bit before, and so there's the self-image, right, in this, but there's also an image about, others in the world, and, the way things are, and the way God is. The God image is another major image that's very deep in the unconscious, and we're always responding to it, not really recognizing it. The image was created when the orderly world and the concepts of the child were destroyed. And the wrong conclusions derive first from the generalization. So, that's just the tendency of the mind, it wants to have the formula, the rules, so that it can navigate, right? And doesn't know that there's this inner, intuition and life force that, is really the deeper capacity that we have. And so reality is not that all people are going to have the same shortcomings as, what we encounter as children, whether parents or other. Not all conditions of life are similar to those the child discovers in its own surroundings. And then the defense mechanism that the child chooses within its limited understanding of the world is going to, it's going to be the wrong understanding, and therefore the wrong, solution for it. And of course, y'all know, any kind of defense mechanism is ultimately not going to, resolve the situation. But, it helps us survive. It's what we can do at the beginning, it's part of the journey. And so at some point, we begin to do this work more consciously. And, the child is going to choose with a limited understanding of the world, and what it chooses is going to be, wrong as such. And then it generalizes, right? And that's where, there's a fact of kind of recreating so much in our lives, and kind of having a certain theme and a certain quality and a certain kind of approach and, understanding of the world sort of settles in, informed by all of these unconscious images that we've encountered. So in our conscious journey spiritually, right, we want to try to bring them into consciousness. We want to recognize what are these, belief structures and these energetic, boxes that we're locked inside of. Vicious circles, basically, right, are connected with the images.
Darlene, maybe I could relate an experience from my childhood. It was probably around the age of 10, I would say, that I suddenly realized that my parents were overreactors. And I felt like it was pointless to share anything with them, because they would typically overreact to everything. And it would create a situation that was, for me, too difficult to manage. So I stopped sharing with my parents about around the age of 10 and never shared with them again, ever. Exactly. They don't know me. They didn't, my father didn't know me. He died when he was 97, I guess, a few years ago. He didn't know me. And my mother still doesn't know me.
Yeah.
You know, they don't know me because I never shared anything with them.
And you know, from the place of, you know, the child and the difficulty, you know, and some people, I mean, you know, they may never have really, you know, been able to receive any of your sharing, but at another level, you know, it is like to look at the vicious circle, you know, somehow that, you know, because now, you know, you withhold any sharing, you know, and so there, you know, it perpetuates it in some way, right? Not saying that you should share some more or anything like that, but, you know, this is how, you know, these things get embedded in these patterns and dynamics within the family. And they're very difficult to break out of. So even if we never break out of them, just being conscious of them is, I think, you know, huge. Yeah. And, you know, probably, you know, your mom's still too, you know, it's like people are too old now, right? When people get old, yeah, you know, you can't really do anything more. But, you know, just having the awareness, you know, for yourself and, you know, understanding hopefully can, you know, be of value for in all of this, and then maybe noticing like, well, where in the rest of my world do I do that, you know? And as long as you're, you know, having some openings, you know, in other places, I think you're already in movement, right? So yeah, and you clearly do that all the time. So sometimes our parents, you know, that it is, you know, the dynamics there are pretty locked and rigid in there, and there's a kind of sadness about that, but also, you know, who they are beyond this lifetime, you know, who knows, you know. And so we're all, you know, teaching and learning from each other, and sometimes we play the role of the good enemy, you know, or the, you know, the one that has to be, you know, broken away from, you know, because if the child never rebelled or, you know, rejected or, you know, made the movement into its own individuation, right? And sometimes that happens because, you know, the parents are impossible to relate to, right? And otherwise we just stay home. I mean, I don't know, I think maybe in this current generation seems a little more, you know, that, and maybe necessary, you know, not saying even it's wrong, but, you know, maybe parents are a little less difficult to be with, you know, as well. But children seem to be staying in the nest more, you know, and for many reasons, you know, in the world. So, but it's interesting to see how, you know, these cycles go. And, you know, so in this whole process of individuating and challenging our own images, right? And doing that, in some way, it's part of what we came in, was to take that piece of consciousness that is not all of our consciousness, but it's now locked within us, you know, and try to set it free, right? You know, it's energy, it's life force, it's, you know, it needs truth, it needs love, it needs, you know, to let go of the suffering and the pain that it got wrapped around in that. And so in some way, to me, you know, when we're working with our images, you know, we're doing inner child healing, or we're actually setting free aspects of spirit that have been trapped in image, maybe even prior to incarnation, right? And so this is a beautiful work of service to set free these images inside of us. So, you know, in the child's mind, we assume our case is singular, you know, where everyone else had perfect parents, perfect home conditions, only we were alone experiencing the shocking uniqueness that had to be hidden from everyone, even from ourselves as well, of course, from our parents or others close to you. And the shame arose from the mistaken idea that your case was unique and the whole thought and emotional process had to be hidden away because of the shame. When these processes remain hidden, part of your personality cannot grow up with the rest of your being. It could not change and adjust and learn, for only what is out in the light can grow. If a plant is left in the earth with its roots cut off, it cannot grow. It is the same with every emotional current or tendency. Therefore, you should not be surprised when you discover that your image conclusions conform not at all to your otherwise grown-up intelligence. And then he talks a little bit about conditioning, and the example of how dogs are conditioned. And a lot of our, early childhood, it's a form of, conditioning. And an infant or a very young child knows only the most primitive emotions, and it knows what feels good or bad, and it knows love and pleasure when it gets its way, when its will is done, and it knows, pain and resentment and anger, God says hatred when its will is not done. And it really is kind of boiling down to just as simple as that, right? And much later in life, we learn to evaluate more objectively and sort of tolerate more states of discomfort and displeasure, and recognize that sometimes, it's like there's a movement that, has value, and we don't have to fight and defend against all of those things. But when we're little, it's overwhelming. We don't understand it. We live in the moment, and the moment is everything. So we're unhappy in this moment. Everything is terrible in our lives, right? So children are, this process of development from that child consciousness is a very powerful thing. And as we hopefully, embody more and more and learn more and more in this process of consciousness, that children will be parented in a way that will help them a lot more manage and develop and get good ground and have a better purchase on life. But many of us, we came in, with a lot of strength to work through a lot of, parts of stuff that, we're in a lot of distortion and confusion and pain and suffering. And I think in a way, maybe even in this lifetime, because we knew there was so much light coming into the planet and so much, wisdom coming in and stuff that maybe even we said, okay, I'm going to take on, some big things, right? And of course, maybe compared to other people in the world, our challenges are pretty little. But, most of us that are doing this work, we've had our share of, hurt and pain and being lost, and yet, here we are, and this path of the past, right? Help us so much, and really understanding that, life isn't about always being, happy, but there's something bigger going on. And as we unravel these kinds of places, then, yeah, I think, we can expand more and more into our truest state, and then one way of thinking about it is spirit is, like as we clear out our lower self, the higher self can be embodied more and more, right? So, we're healing and releasing these old images, these old, pain bodies, these old states of belief that, are not in truth and in reality. And as that purification happens, then more and more of who we really are already, of the wisdom of the higher self, of the nature of of the God within, can come down and inhabit our lives, right? And then we can be of more and more service. So in a way, this is the work, to clear our own images and bring in more light and, help, like the whole world is working in this way. So where we can, not get caught in other people's images or our own, you know, also we can be part of, you know, helping in the world rather than adding to the confusion. So any comments, or I mean, I'm kind of just rambling. I don't know if I'm making any sense tonight. So how are we doing, guys? Is this feeling useful?
Doing good.
So when the image lives, we continue the childish procedure because in that respect, our mind remains childish. And usually, you know, it kind of would get knocked unconscious and we regress into that childish consciousness, even though we may in other times, you know, live beyond it. But there, you know, when this activated in us, when these images are active, like we literally lose our adult capacity. And regardless of how much the rest of our personality has improved and learned, the developed personality, which is capable of judging maturely on the intellectual level, and in instances where no image currents obstruct your perception, right? But where this slow or sudden shock impression has affected the soul, one does not assimilate the experience consciously, and therefore one's mind remains childish. It remains in the state in which it was when the image conclusions were formed and pushed into the unconscious. So does that make sense? I mean, I watched myself totally regress at the dentist earlier today, right? You know, so I mean, I know it's something that happens to me all the time, but I'm somebody that is, you know, usually a little less uptight and, you know, I don't have like good structured boundaries, and, you know, probably other people are, you know, holding themselves and not letting themselves have meltdowns in the same way that I might. I don't know, maybe other people do that too, but, you know, it's like that there's a way that, you know, we do regress in these places. And then maybe it also, sometimes we go to our, you know, withdrawal or our, you know, power mask or our love mask. And then, you know, maybe that's part of it is I tend to go to my power mask, which makes everybody a little uncomfortable. So.
Hey, Darlene.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with EMDR?
A little bit, yeah. I'm aware of it.
So
Tried it one time, but hadn't. Go ahead.
So my thoughts are a lot of what the guy talks about is bringing up images, feeling them, witnessing them, right? Kind of holding this child, reparenting, all those kinds of words. I find EMDR being an effective tool around that. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. Like with the dentist example, like you get triggered, you go home, and then you try to hold that child, right? They got triggered based on some kind of interpretation of rejection or some kind of mask that she wore or something like that, right? But there needs to be a certain integration tool to start that communication between those different parts that can hold one another. Otherwise, we just walk around life just getting triggered and then feeling frustrated that we're being triggered.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I don't, you know, like, I think there's EMDR is probably somehow a way that helps us, you know, integrate and do all of that. I don't know if you want to say more about your understanding of how that works, but absolutely, like the more, I mean, we just have to, you know, sort of somehow there's, you know, sort of almost what autonomic nervous system pairing of reactivity, right, in the system, in these things. And that's what's hard, even when you're conscious, you know. So my understanding is EMDR helps kind of reduce some of that. Is that accurate? Sort of the inner charge around the.
Yeah, my understanding is that it increases communication between the two halves of the brain, basically replicating the rapid eye movement that we use while we sleep to process. And I find that it helps with the defensive parts of us, kind of like the ego parts. So it almost kind of opens up a back door to the ego parts.
Uh-huh.
What's the process, Jacob? What do you actually
It's an
do?
eye movement. Basically, you either tap on the opposite sides of your body, which is mildly effective. I think the more effective way is actually following a light that just goes from left to right, or somebody else's fingers, and you basically do that as a way of connecting to different memories and different stories that you have tied up into this. And in my experience, almost like you're sitting there watching kind of like a movie of yourself, and your mind shows you these different stories and ideas and memories that start jumping up, and you start processing and kind of like tying it all together. And then you find your distorted belief, and then you start integrating a more complex kind of adult, more true belief that's based in reality, not the hurt of the past.
So I think it's in similar ways, with what the guy deals with image, but I think it adds this, I mean, with, the trauma, and, it adds an autonomics process that can help maybe, with reducing the PTSD kinds of, reactions or something like that is my sense. I was curious, as you were describing it, because, like I don't know if you know anybody like this, but I'm what they call aphantasia or aphantasia. I don't even know which, but I do not have visual imagery. And so, for me, some of these things, like have a different impact, or I don't know how to work with them because I don't know, there's no imagery with them. So, that was, as you were describing it, interesting to me that you were, talking about working with the images the visuals, and stuff like that. So
yeah, for me, Darlene, it's sometimes images, but sometimes it's a sensation in the body, or there's a lightness all of a sudden, or a tension, or sometimes a kind of a name or an age pops into my mind, and it's not always very visual, but
right, you have some sense about it, right? So you're just exploring more, learning more about who this is, and kind of stepping back. I mean, that's, I think, what's so good about that is, like, as we observe it, right, then we become connected with the observer rather than with the the part that is in distress. And so now it's not all by itself. Right.
Exactly. And that was my point, is that if we don't take a moment and go to that part that you described getting triggered at the dentist's office, that it will just keep being re-triggered. So I guess daily review, right, is often recommended, and just doing like almost like a psychodrama release of it, kind of sitting with it, observing it, right, mindfully. So I find those tools to be pretty powerful, and EMDR and internal family systems kind of processes to integrate these parts, I find pretty helpful.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm still, I think we're all learning more and more, but I think to me, exactly, like, there's just like somehow the trauma has to be faced and moved through, like the frozenness, like the guide talks about, right, in the image. And so, whatever support we can create, to allow that, and depending on also the trauma that it was, I mean, some things are, really intense. So it is a journey. And I agree, there's just this way of trying to keep integrating these parts, and being, like when we fall into the image, like, like I was anymore, I'm not completely lost in it, but they're strong. And so, like, I am, the strong aspect of the child is present, right, and then there's another part of me that's in the background going, yeah, this is like familiar, and here we go again. And so now I've had enough awareness of this as a PTSD kind of reaction, so can hold it better. and at one time would have been, you know, I mean, I don't know, I might have gotten arrested. I don't know. You know, there are ways that sometimes I'm not, you know, very good at containing the emotional for people's comfort, you know, like there's a part of me that always knows I'm more contained, you know, but it's like, I don't know, there's something maybe in the aggression defense that, I don't know, I always seem surprised that they seem so freaked out by me. It's like I'm just a little old lady, 71 years old, you know, having some feelings. I don't get why I'm so terrifying to everybody, but it seems to be the world, you know, and maybe it is just because, you know, things are so keyed up and on edge, and, you know, people are so crazy in so many ways. Nobody knows if you're safe or not. So, but
do you want to give us a real example of what happened in the dentist chair today, or not?
Well, I can, yeah, I mean, you know, I went in for a cleaning, and I had already been put off for a while, and I was definitely in need, and there was a way in which I could feel that, you know I have a couple of cavities, right, you know, and I've been treating them, you know, even with clove and stuff like that. And so even when I was sitting in the chair, I was aware, oh, there's, you know, some food stuck, you know, close to that cavity, because I can feel the aching starting, right? So she was beginning to clean my teeth. And so I thought, well, let me just ask her to clean that place there, so I don't have to sit and feel it throbbing, you know, while she cleans the other side. And I thought it was a fairly reasonable request. But she started saying, you know, like she went in over there a minute, and then she's saying, you know, like I can't scrape the cavity. And I said, yeah, I don't need you to scrape. I didn't think that was what I was asking, you know, so I kind of repeated myself, you know, like, you know, of just, and then, you know, when she refused again, you know, I you know, I don't stay, you know, really nice and sweet and in my love mask all the time, you know, but I'm not like terrible or anything. So I'm just saying, well, you know, like, can you give me a toothpick then, and I'll I'll take care of it, you know, like, because you know, clearly she didn't want to touch it, you know, and I would. So, and she walked out. She said, let me go get the doctor. And she got the doctor, and he was there talking to me, you know, and I thought, well, we needed a consult anyway. And so, you know, and we were talking about what happened and also that, and I thought everything was fine. And then at the very end of the little, you know, discussion I had, you know, they told me she wasn't gonna see me, and I'd been waiting all this time to, you know, have my teeth cleaned. And so that's when I finally hit the ceiling.
All right, yeah, I got you.
So,
Good.
and then I go out of the office, you know, and they actually called the police.
You're a mean woman. There's no doubt in my mind.
I know. I'm a force to be tangled with. Thank goodness the woman, the officer that came was, you know, a nice young lady, and, you know, we had a fine conversation, you know. But I just, you know, all of this stuff, you know, just I always am so surprised, because people, I guess, you know, I do have, you know, somewhat of an aggressive mask that, you know, and everybody else is not comfortable in that. So I guess somehow I scare everybody. I don't know.
I think you're just direct is what you are. You know,
well, I mean,
direct.
that's how I experience it, but, you know, but I don't know. It's like, so, but it, you know, kind of is confusing for the child. And maybe, you know, like she always feels like, you know, like nobody's, I mean, you know, like she was just trying to be, you know, taking care of herself, you know, and then she wasn't intending on creating all of that. But, you know, since she did, you know, well, you know, poo on everybody.
All right, thanks. I tend to make them wrong rather than me, but okay, good. I got it.
Well, I mean, you know, they are too, but I mean, you know, I think there is a, you know, I can see, you know, oh, that triggered this old thing. I mean, I've been here before, right? You know, this isn't the first time. So for whatever reason, it needed to come into the light again, I guess, you know, so now it's more present, and, you know, there's maybe some more work that can be done with it. We'll see, you know.
Sounds like you may have triggered her more than she triggered you.
You know, apparently, and I, you know, and that's where I'm, you know, I don't exactly understand how.
They call the police. That's pretty, you know, dramatic, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think they may not. I think I left the office, right? You know, because they were throwing me out, and then I sat there because I was trying to figure out, you know, like I wanted to call and make a complaint with whoever one complains, you know, whatever board or whatever, you know, because that didn't. And so I was sitting out by my car, you know, trying to on my phone, and so I guess that made them nervous or something. I don't know, because then the police showed up. So. So, but yeah, you know, it's like, and I was aware, okay, like I'm in image land, you know, like this is, you know.
They might have thought they were on the verge of a mass shooting. You were
Yeah, probably.
come back in with a gun and shoot everybody in the office.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I guess I can understand, you know, like people are, you know, very, you know, anxious these days about stuff. So. And maybe I needed to find another dentist, right? Which is the end result of it all, right? You know, which is oftentimes, you know, when these kinds of things happen, if nothing else, you know, it's a way of getting me to move out of a situation that's not working for me, right? And find something better. So we'll see. Well, I don't know exactly what conclusion to draw of all of that yet, but could clearly tell I was in one of my images, big time. So,
Darlene, can you scroll down to that last paragraph, the one before that?
Before that.
Yeah, it talks about keeping the conclusions in an unconscious state instead of a conscious state. That's the part, yeah, right at the end of that paragraph there, just past that purple stuff, yeah. It remains in the state in which it was when the image conclusions were formed and pushed into the unconscious. Right. So that part of it, it's like every time I read a sentence like that, it's telling me that, you know, piece of process work needs to be done to reacquaint the adult self with the original emotion that was felt by the child that sent the child into this fear state that formed the image to begin with. Because the guy says it over and over again, you can intellectualize this until the cows come home, but until you actually feel it and understand the damage that was done, you won't make the transition from the real transition from unconscious to conscious.
Right, exactly. So, you know, to me, you know, the child, like, haven't had a chance exactly yet, you know, but there's a piece of work that just is, you know, for that part of me that got activated, right? You know, like it's there for me now. I'm shifting, you know, I'm no longer like totally identified with it. I never was completely. And so I was holding it, right? You know, but now there's a point in time when I need to go in and like that, you know, part that got triggered and activated. And, you know, like, I mean, there's a hurt there, there's a wound, right? You know, and so, you know, I can allow that feeling to be felt in its soft pain, right? And the way, you know, if I, you know, just, you know, am in the defense, you know, then that's the hard pain, right? But there's a way that if I go be present with the child, I can help the child understand, you know, I can help re-educate the child. I can let the child have the truth of the feeling that was, you know, frozen and couldn't be felt back then, which is really the real soft pain that needs to be set free. And, you know, it's grief, you know, usually, or hurt, you know, that we just need to feel. And, you know, once we do, there's a resilience and a bouncing back and a, you know, we don't have to carry the wound. But what we usually do is we're afraid of, we don't know what to do with it, right? So we just kind of stick it inside of us somewhere and hold it, and are afraid to go into, through, and out the other side of it. And so, yeah, you know, hopefully, you know, being with that part of me now that got activated, right? So that I can bring truth.
Yeah, the personality has a number of parts to keep it suppressed. You know, the ISI, the mask, the superficial ego, all play a part in calming the trigger and stuffing it back into the unconscious, right?
Yeah, if we're still afraid or not, sort of not being our own helper in a sense, right? You know, it's like we're sort of in this stage where we're waking up our own consciousness and aligning with the higher self so that we can, you know, be the helpers for all of these inner parts that are still trapped in image or frozen inside of us in some way, right? Does that how it makes sense to you?
Yeah.
And so there is this, you know, healing that and holding space that does feel like, you know, is I mean, I don't know, for some reason, when we feel the pain of something with the hard pain, it doesn't heal, right? So somehow we have to make that shift. And for me, often it is to awaken my own understanding, and so I can go in and hold the truth and, you know, let the child have its feelings, but basically re-educating that part of me as to, you know, a larger, you know, and as long as it feels like understood and connected with, usually it can go, you know, it can shift. That the image that was formed around that and all of, you know, it actually unravels and lifts up. So I think, you know, what we're talking about here is really, I mean, the guide talks about these images as actual energetic things, right? Structures. And there is a dissolving of these images. And so what we're doing as we go in and, you know, like instead of suppressing the feelings, let ourselves do the regression in one form or another. You know, it's always better if we can, you know, not do our regressions publicly, but if we must, it's probably better than not doing regressions at all, right?
Well, we do them in group as a piece of
Yes,
process work, and that's actually where the most
exactly.
you know, progress is made.
Exactly. Yeah, to witness each other.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily say you made much progress in the dental chair today. But if you had come home and had a group meeting tonight, you know, and relived your experience in the dentist chair, then maybe you would have had a moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you can, I mean, I plan on still doing that. I mean, you know, and there is an inner, this is what I call, you know, this, like I've gone from doing an external process, which we do in groups and is still useful in groups, you know, but to doing this kind of work internally. And so, yeah, there's, you know, there's a whole sitting with these energies and working them now that, you know, will continue, right? You know, I'm welcoming this experience now as just a part of, you know, the work that I'm, you know, trying to heal, right? So it's just an opportunity for healing.
Yeah.
So where was we? Let's see. Okay, an infant or a very young child knows only the most primitive emotions. So we kind of did cover that.
Yeah, we already covered that a little further down. Yeah, there you go.
So a long time before we started to discuss the images, I mentioned the term emotional maturity. Now you'll understand better how it happens that a part of an otherwise mature being remains immature. Actually, this part continues to make the same deductions emotionally and unconsciously as the child had made, so long as the image is not lifted into consciousness. Thus, it is possible that you discover conclusions and faulty reasoning within yourself that do not at all correspond to the rest of your person. You may find it shocking, at least for a while, to recognize the primitive way in which your emotional reasoning functions. Considered in the light of this explanation, you will know that part of you simply could not grow up because certain parts were left submerged in your unconscious. And you will not be surprised to find still living within you the child that has not assimilated what you otherwise learned. That is why images cannot be found unless one relives emotionally one's childhood and penetrates the irrational layers of consciousness. Merely remembering is not enough. You will find that your image conclusions are logical in their own limited way. You may even be surprised about the reasoning faculty, faulty as it may be, that exists in your unconscious. It is the reasoning of the child living in you, and this is the way you reasoned when you were perhaps 10 years old or less. The tragic thing about the images is that they assume power. They will make you see and notice only certain things. Connected with your image conclusion, and in such a way that your image will be constantly supported and strengthened in later life. You know, these vicious circles prove our images, right? You know, and it's all a kind of a inner process that keeps recycling through us until we can bring it into consciousness. So your image conclusions conflict with the grown-up desires and aims of your life, and thereby cause not only a painful discrepancy, but untold conflicts and problems with your conscious goals, as well as with the reality of life. And this must be understandable to all, even if you do not believe that emotions and thoughts are forms, creating emotional magnetic fields that draw events and experiences towards you. So, you know, this happens on multiple levels. You know, it happens on the level of just the, you know, interpersonal defense system. And then it also happens, like, you know, in this level of the electromagnetic fields, right? The more unconscious the emotions and the greater the complexity of thoughts, the more powerful they must be, because while unconscious, they are out of your control and cannot be adjusted to reality. So when they get inflexible, you know, rigid and unconscious, right, you know, then we just kind of, you know, keep recycling in them, and then we're identified with them, you know, like there's not any part of our conscious that realizes, oh, you know, something's maybe in our approach, you know, something, you know, like we can't figure it out. So we just keep kind of repeating, you know, and trying to get it right. Now that's one of the things, you know, like I could feel, you know, like, and so then for me, the child often, you know, if she doesn't feel heard, she raises her voice, right? You know, let me speak louder then. And that intimidates people, right? You know, and they feel attacked by that. And she doesn't understand that. She's just trying to make them understand her, right? You know, so these are the kinds of vicious circles that get, you know, happening.
Is that so it's kind very, of, well, give me the toothpick and I'll find my problem
yeah,
myself?
Right.
I don't know.
And even then, I didn't think I was saying that very, you know, very aggressively, but for some reason, you know, like, you know,
give me the toothpick and I'll clean my own damn teeth.
Right, right.
I don't know why I came here in the first place.
and I don't even think I was saying it, but maybe that's how she felt it. I don't know. I was mostly just, you know, I didn't feel like I was so far in there. I don't know what triggered that or why it happened. So, you know, and I was kind of blown away by it, and I'll take responsibility. I mean, I'm sure it was like, you know, but, you know, it just was kind of an out of the blue thing. And then that just becomes, okay, so good grist for the mill, right? You know, and
yeah, well, okay. I'm thinking I'm getting a lot out of your experience here, almost more than the lecture. So if you want to keep going on your experience here, I mean,
well, I'll try, you know, and I think we're kind of weaving it together, maybe, hopefully, you know, so that it, you know, but it, you know, there's there's a way that, you know, there very definitely was, you know, this childlike place in me that got triggered, you know, and then the reaction, you know, like it kept going into a more irrational, emotional, childlike place, right?
Well, if you
And
want,
then,
I
of
don't.
course, what happens for people, you know, when other people are doing that, they go into their rigid adult place, right? You know, which then usually triggers my child because she's gonna gonna
Well, do
make
you know
them
what your
feel
trigger was?
something
I don't know
really.
if you want to go into it further, but I'd be curious because it's a live, real thing. What was being triggered in you? Do you know? If you want to go into it.
Well, you know, at the beginning, I didn't feel I was all that triggered. I thought I was just trying to ask for a reasonable request. So I was kind of surprised that, you know, she felt uncomfortable, you know, with what I was saying, you know, but I'm a 71-year-old grumpy old lady sometimes, you know, I don't know, you know, I'm not always in my love mask, you know, being sweet, you know, so.
Well, look back at that. Back at what actually happened. I mean, don't make a false claim here. I mean, just what is the reality? Were you really kind of a
I
grumpy
don't
old
know
lady?
exactly. I mean, what I remember, you know, is my side of it, you know, so I'm just, you know, trying to deal with this and, you know, and then she's saying she's getting uncomfortable. She's saying she doesn't want to scale the cavity, and I can understand that. I wasn't, so I'm thinking, well, that's not what I'm asking. You know, I don't think. And so, like, as I'm going, I'm thinking somehow we're not communicating these words, you know, so, you know, I'm trying to use other words, you know, but she repeats that she's not going to scale the cavity. And so again, I'm not being heard. So I think I got louder. And I think that's when she went and got the dentist.
Yeah, that makes sense. So she felt attacked, and you were trying to be clear, just assertive, right? So I can see how
I'm just, you know, like, yeah, and maybe a little frustrated, you know, like I'm trying to explain this, right, you know, and I don't understand why why we're not meeting. I'll try it again.
Just you were trying to say what Frank said, like, well, damn it, get it right, you know, but you didn't verbalize it quite like he did. But it was the energy was there.
But,
Maybe,
you know, I was not understanding why. I mean, what I was asking, you know, was, and again, it was something I'd been doing, right? You know, like, so I have a sensitive place on my tooth when a little food gets caught, and I had explained this to them in there, you know, and it's against the cavity, it starts aching, right? You know, the nerve starts firing. And, you know, what helps it is to take a dental stick in there and, you know, get whatever little piece of food that's trapped in there out. So that's all I was asking, I thought. So I was totally confused, you know, like when she talked about scaling the cavity. So I don't know, maybe, you know, our worlds were just in completely different places. And that's what I was asking. And I didn't realize it, but I'm doing it all the time myself. So I don't know why it would be so difficult, you know. And so then I just said, well, can I, you know, like, okay, so just, you know, can I get, and I probably should have, I used toothpick because that's just, you know, in my mind what these things are called. But, you know, I think the proper word, had I did, you know, would have been, you know, one of those, you know, dental plastic, you know, picks for the teeth, you know, so I can clean it myself, right? If you know, and I don't know, you know, I mean, I'm sure I was a little frustrated, but to me, I don't know, everybody seems to think that anything above a love mask, you know, sweetness, you know, is being hostile and aggressive, you know, and maybe it is. Maybe I need to learn to be more in my higher self, you know, and less frustrated and demanding of people that are trying to do a job. I don't know. I'll take some.
maybe not, you know. So maybe she just got her authority got challenged, and you just triggered it, and that was that, you know.
And I assume that, you know, these things come up, you know, for my purification. And, you know, part of me is saying, you know, well, yeah, you know, like maybe if I were a little less conscious, it would be okay to get away with it. But maybe the universe is asking me to be a little more conscious, right? And so, you know, it's just reminding me not to go to my inner child so easily and try to maintain my adult presence, right? You know, so who knows? it's all you know, like, to me, these things come through, you know, and we work them, you know, in different ways, and they're continually informing. I mean, this will, you know, keep showing up in different ways, and, you know, be a part of the puzzle on the blackboard for right now. And maybe I'll make huge strides and it'll transform a lot, or maybe I'll, you know, do a little work and then kind of like somehow the Ferris wheel or the merry-go-round, you know, goes past and I'm on the other side of things and something else is happening. And then I cycle back to it later on. You know, it just always seems like it's a spiral in a way that we encounter, and life activates these places that, you know, we came in to become more conscious of and to try to help heal. And, you know, so that was clearly a child place in me that, you know, by the end of it, I mean, completely, and maybe it was a little bit immature the way I was reacting in the first place. I don't know.
Yeah, I like your description of like a merry-go-round. It comes around and comes around, spirals, and I that's my experience as well. I don't get it right away. It takes a while to loop back around. And, oh, or in the middle of the night, I'll think, oh, that's what I, you know, well, that kind of stuff. And, yeah, that makes sense to me.
Exactly. And you know, I think there's a way that it clears, you know, some stuff, you know, brings some stuff into consciousness, clears, but, you know, these things are, you know, lifetimes deep maybe or something. And so, you know, sometimes, you know, it's like, to me, we're working with these things, you know, it's what we came in to explore and to understand and to try to heal, and to where they're, you know, sort of blocking our own, you know, illumination or our own capacity for service or our own light coming into the world. You know, it's like not like I want to, you know, I don't know, be the bad one and make the dentist office a good one, but I do want to realize, you know, that there's probably a way that, you know, I want to increase my light. So in another instance of that, maybe it can happen a little differently. and you know, coming out, you know, like, to me, I mean, so many people are, I think, so contained in their immature parts that they really don't know they're there. So I've always been a little bit of not able to contain all my inner, you know, immature parts very well. And in some ways, maybe that can be a little embarrassing sometimes, but in some ways I'm grateful, because it means that I get to see what's there inside of me, and I can't really pretend that I'm all fixed, you know. It's like, okay, here she comes, right? You know, and I find that, you know, like, actually, you know, I'm glad, right? You know, and then so she needed to come out and shed some light, and maybe we can make another step deeper into it. And maybe I needed to find another dentist, right? You know, often the universe seems to work that way, right? So let's see, where are we now? Mature beings know they can control life only by going with it, and by not demanding that life follow their wishes, but by following life by adjusting to it. And where you have your image, you do not adjust, you demand, and you throw a temper tantrum inside when your demands are not met. You know, and there was a little I mean, I didn't feel like there was a huge one, but, you know, until they finally you know, refused to see me at all, and then I had a little bigger temper tantrum. But you know, these demands are made on the very faulty premise. Therefore, you may get what you ask for, but you also get what is part of your unconscious demand. So my unconscious demand there must have been that, you know, the dentist be a bad guy, and and I can prove it, you know, by seeing what he did to me or something like that. You know, there's some deeper part, right, that I can ferret out in that also, to just take full responsibility. But I can also hold the child, right, you know, and you know, help, you know, her not feel like you know, I mean, she really, you know, I mean, I can affirm for her, you know, like you weren't doing anything too terribly bad, you know, they kind of overreacted, right? And so if I can, you know, tell her that, you know, and befriend her and kind of, and then, you know, say, and then let's look a little deeper because, you know, maybe there's something really cool here, you know, because you had a big reaction, right? You know, and then we can find some bigger healing piece. And so when I can befriend her and, you know, work with all of it that way and not feel, you know, humiliated or ashamed or anything like that, right? You know, then it is what it is. And it came into the light. I hope that they get something out of it. I don't know. I have to decide. I was a little vindictive when I left a rating on there. So maybe I go take that off again later or something. I don't know. So, and I actually, the rating was not negative and a vindictive. I mean, it was like, you know, I was just trying to speak my case and say that didn't feel good. But anyway, so goodness, this is a whole session for me, huh?
It was great for me too, because it's like that you're talking about me, so that's great.
Okay, so we want certain things, a way of life, whatever it may be, for its advantages. But you ignore, as the child ignored, that every advantage has a disadvantage. So when you're insistent, inner crying, and demanding, you get the supposed advantage and you also get its disadvantage. And you do not like the disadvantage you unconsciously asked for and think that life has treated you unjustly. So, you know, that would be something maybe I would want to go in and sit with a little more, you know, in my recent experience. As I've said before, everyone who is getting close to nearing an image recognition feels a profound shame. You do not feel shame because all of a sudden you discover something very wicked or hideous. No, you may be much more ashamed of something that is merely silly. When you form this image, the reasoning that makes you ashamed now was in your childhood and in accord with your capacity to reason and think. So I would say, you know, like I don't feel, I mean, I think, you know, like when before I was more aligned with my higher self, there was more shame. And I do feel like, you know, the child part of me feeling some shame. So I have to kind of go in with that child and say, okay, yeah, you know, but it's not all that bad. But, you know, like there's ways I think when we truly are identified with the higher self, you know, working with these, you know, wounded parts, that we don't have to feel a whole lot of shame. And I think it's the shame that is the real way that negativity, you know, takes us down, right? You know, there's no point of shame, and it's very debilitating for us. So when we can, you know, recognize, you know, that, you know, we're just here learning and we make mistakes, right? And that's how we learn. And what's the shame in that? And then try to seek to learn. If we shame ourselves, usually we get so embarrassed and we hide so much, we really don't learn, right? You know, it's like we can't face and feel and examine it because it just feels so shameful, you know, so we bury it again and then it just recycles. So you're now at the point when you recognize that there has been your faulty deduction and your wrong conclusion, and you may even see, you know, like it's an old piece, and you are quite embarrassed that this was part of your mind below your consciousness, but still part of your mind, your reaction. It will make it easier for you to accept this if you consider that in this respect you remained a child because you left the entire reasoning process in the darkness of your unconscious. It will help you also to realize that there is no one among all those who know you who does not have his or her own images and similar incongruities. So there really is no need for shame, right? If you converse with a 4 to 10-year-old, you would not be surprised at such reasoning. Realize that and you will overcome your embarrassment. Consider that you are not the only one. However, most people do not realize this and keep their images covered. Therefore, you certainly have a great advantage through self-awareness, knowing your own stupidities while others do not know theirs. Yes, my friends, this sounds strong, but in the infant part of your soul, as compared with your conscious mind, you will discover childish stupidities. When you first search for your images, you will probably be more concerned with your inner conflicts and with the wrongness of the conclusions as such. You will review your reactions, you will re-experience the wrong emotions and compare them in theory with the right principles. And that is as it should be. But after you have thoroughly understood all this, much more work has to be done. You have to find out not only in what respect you have reenacted your images going from one pattern to another, but you also should begin to evaluate everything that happened in your life, things that are apparently not at all your doing. They just happened from the outside. So, when we have a victim consciousness, I could have had the story of, they did it to me in the office, right? What you think of something of your life, when you think of some of your life experiences, asking, what could I possibly have had to do with that? I did not lift a finger to make it happen. It just came to me. Your everyday logic will agree. Yet after you have found your images, you will see that every event, regardless of how out of your control it seemed, was called forth by yourself. The moment you understand how you have directed your life, how you have caused events of which you seem the victim, you will gain the certainty that you are not a drifting little boat tossed by the winds on a great stormy ocean. You will realize that there is no injustice, and that will make you strong and safe. And of course, that was some of the child reaction, right? It was the pain of injustice that came up to be felt in that circumstance, right? You will become mature by the mere acknowledgement of the principle and the truth of self-responsibility as demonstrated in yourself. You will understand how your thereto unconscious desires, trends, and attitudes, brought that in, governs your life. But now that so much has become conscious, you will be able to, I don't like the word control there, like direct your life in consciousness and thus be the captain of your ship. In this way, you will approach life with joy and strength, my dear ones. You will have a strong feeling of certainty. It will appear to you as if you had firm ground under your feet for the first time in your life. So, and then he goes into some Q&As. So, and we're getting towards the end. There was a few that were interesting. So let me pause here. Any other discussion? And maybe we'll do a little bit of this, but we probably won't do all of them.
Darlene, I'm gonna take off.
Okay, Frank.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Another good lecture. See you. Good night, Dick.
Good night,
Joyce.
Hi, Frank.
I mean, there was one piece that I was. Good night, Joyce. People can go if they need to. I was going to just complete a little in the sense of seeing if there was more, because when I was reading this and I read these 4 lectures on images, I kept looking, wanting to find something a little more, like maybe an exercise that we could do or a way that we could clarify, because it seems like in some ways he's describing this in quite abstract terms. And so, oftentimes I think in Pathwork, when we're doing image work, we explore these generalized conclusions that we have about things, sort of almost like, well, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Don't evaluate it too much, but, you say all men are, all women are, life is, like, so we have these, generalized things, like there's probably more specific ones, that we carry too, but those are the big ones. And, like, we of course have a wider perspective, but kind of sometimes the first thing that pops into our minds, like is coming from that more automatic, habitual, deeper kind of unconscious level that the images, come from. So I don't know, does anybody relate to that? Can you just, like, if you drop in, like, I mean, even, the struggle of life is, like, how do you fill in that blank? Or, you know, most women are, how do you fill in that blank? We won't even say all, we'll say most, or, like, and we have, of course, our own self-image, right? Our own idealized self-image, and then, our own, maybe there's a judgment that we carry against ourselves as well. So I don't know if that helps people get to it. We can have images about others. Oftentimes the parents in our lives represent, images really in our soul, right? That reflect these whole categories of classes of things. Okay. So I think that I'll just drop that in, and that's good enough for now.
Well, Darlene, I just want to thank you very much for this presentation. It's been very, very helpful for me. I feel that this is really a lot of work that I need to do, which I think I have been aware of it, but it's such a good thing to have this reminder. And I like your example with the dentist. I mean, it brings it more down, it makes it concrete. And I want to thank you for your willingness to discuss it with us. And I'd also, do you mind if I attend your classes, your meetings here?
These lecture studies, or you want to do in the group?
Lecture, what you're doing here.
Absolutely, no, you're more than welcome. I may not have you on the list. I apologize if I've stopped you. It's not intentional. So, Dick, are you the one that's forwarding to Joyce for that? I don't know if you can just remind me, maybe send me your email so I can.
Yeah, your correct email. I just had cataract surgery, so I had it this afternoon. I'm not seeing very well. Is it heaven@earthway.com?
Earthwalkways, yeah, or earthwalkways@gmail.com. I'm not sure which.
So should I send my email address to you at that email?
Yeah, just yeah, I don't know that, like, maybe usually what I just tell people, but if you're having trouble seeing, that's not going to help you, to go to my website, which is just earthwalkways.com. And then at the top is the email address, right? But I also have a Google, it's just earthwalkways@gmail.com, and then my website address is heaven@earthwalkways.com. So I don't know, hopefully you can try one of those and keep trying. If not, or I could put in the chat, I guess, even before you hear something.
Well, I can give it to her also. So
okay. All right. Great. Well, I'm glad it was good. Thanks, Joyce, for the feedback.
Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, and I'll ditto Joyce, and I like the fact that you use your own experience, and it takes a little courage to do that. But I find that really valuable, more in this case. And actually, I think from the very beginning, I don't think you were conscious of it, but my sense was that you were using this lecture to work on yourself, but without saying it. In other words, it was just your what you called your ramblings were actually yourself unconsciously working on your own process from today. Yeah, that's a great one. Every time I get really upset like that, and you just reminded me of it, that I want to blame the other person, and it's like, let me see what's really underneath here. And your description of cycling through it, which I have to do sometimes in the middle of the night, boom, oh, there, I see that insight, or whatever. But I have to be willing to own my own crap in it, my own childish dysfunction. Otherwise, I block the whole process. And without feeling shame and guilt, that just gets in the way of it. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so thanks so much for tonight. Yeah, the second half got a lot more out of it when you brought it home. So thanks.
Okay, good. Thanks. Okay, take care, everybody.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Dick.
Sounds like a TV show.